A ghost weighed more than a star. Commander Eva Rostova stood on the bridge of the patrol cruiser. Vigilance, the starlight of the Tartarus, reached thin and cold against the armored glass. This was a graveyard sector, a place where dying suns and forgotten shipping lanes converged into a quiet hum of cosmic decay. Her orders were simple: to patrol the void, to show the Concordiat flag, and to log the slow, inevitable entropy of dead space. Below her, the tactical hollow shimmered a placid sea of dark blues and blacks disturbed only by the rhythmic sweep of the ship's sensor arrays. It was a watch defined by its profound lack of incident, a silence that bred complacency. Yet for 3 cycles, something had been wrong. It was a whisper beneath the cosmic noise, a structured signal so faint it was nearly dismissed as a sensor ghost. Dr. Eris Thorne, the ship's resident xenoarchivist and historian, had called it a resonance, a term Rostova found unsettlingly organic. It was a patterned hum, a mathematical ghost hiding in the pulsar's magnetic tides, a relic hiding in plain sight. On the main view screen, the sigil Thorne had isolated from the noise pulsed with a soft internal light, a complex knot of silver lines that seemed to fold in on itself, defying known geometry. The sleeping arrays of something ancient were calling. The stakes were the unwritten laws of forgotten power. Status Magister Rostova said, her voice cutting through the low thrum of the bridge. The ship's integrated AI, a consciousness woven into the vessel's very frame, replied without hesitation. Its voice was a calm, synthesized baritone, the sound of pure reason. No change. Commander, the anomaly remains constant. Source is localized to the debris field orbiting Tartarus 7. Probability of natural origin is less than 1/millionth of a percentile. A deep space freighter crew passing through the sector's edge a week prior had logged a garbled comm about a singing rock, dismissing it as jump drive fatigue. They had heard the first stirrings of the Leviathan. Jax, her tactical officer, shifted in his seat, his knuckles white on the console's edge. "It's daring us to come closer," he murmured, his eyes fixed on the shimmering sigil. "Whatever it is, it's not shy." Rostova understood his tension. It was a predator's instinct. You do not approach a strange sound in the dark without expecting teeth. But her duty was not to hunt. It was to know. We were not explorers. We were ghost keepers. The vigilance was a tool of law, not conquest, a vessel designed to enforce treaties and deter pirates. Its weapons were potent but precise, its armor thick but not intended for brawling with capital ship-homes. As they eased into the outer debris field of the gas giant, the ship's sensors began to paint a picture that defied all Concordiat records. Thorne stood beside her, his face pale, his gaze locked on the incoming data streams. The composition of this debris. "It's not asteroid fragmentation," he said, his voice hushed with awe. "It's processed alloy crystalline structures, ablative ceramics. This isn't a field. It's a graveyard." Magister's voice solidified the observation with cold fact. "I am detecting wreckage of multiple unknown ship classes. Energy signatures are consistent with pre-diaspora weaponry. Age estimates exceed 10 millennia." The bridge crew exchanged uneasy glances. They were flying through the silent remnants of a battle fought when their own species was still tethered to its cradle world. The hum grew stronger here, a thrum that vibrated through the deck plates, a low, resonant chant that spoke of immense dormant power. It was the sound of a giant sleeping. Then the debris cleared. Before them, hanging in the void like a shard of polished obsidian, was the source. It was a vessel, but that word felt inadequate, like calling a mountain a stone. It was a kilometer-long sliver of midnight, its hull faceted with angles that seemed to drink the starlight. There were no visible weapon ports, no engine bells, no sensor masts. Its surface was a seamless crystalline black, broken only by the faint, pulsing silver sigil they had tracked from half a system away. It was a tomb, a monument, and a warning all in one. A legacy of silence was about to be broken. Magnify the sigil. Thorn breathed, his scholarly calm evaporating into raw excitement. Cross-reference with the first ancestor archives. All of them. The image on the screen zoomed in, revealing the impossible geometry of the silver lines. They were not merely etched. They flowed like liquid metal frozen an instant before settling. A low chime echoed from Thorn's console. "Match," he whispered, stunned. "It's in the codices. The forbidden ones. The records of the saint ships." Jack swore under his breath. A saint ship, here I thought those were myths. Propaganda. They were legends told to frighten children and inspire zealots. Tales of ancient human vessels imbued with incomprehensible power and an even more incomprehensible will. They were not warships. They were arbiters. Judges. They did not conquer. They balanced accounts. Rostova felt a chill that had nothing to do with the recycled air. She was a commander of the Concordiat Navy. Her authority was derived from signed treaties and legislative bodies. What law did this ancient thing obey? Before she could issue an order, a proximity alert blared. A trio of new contacts had just dropped from jump space, their energy signatures sharp and aggressive. They were Concordiat vessels, but not from her patrol group. Their hulls were stark white and crimson, the colors of the Kith regulators. Proctor Valerius, a man whose reputation for rigid adherence to doctrine was known throughout the fleet, hailed them. His face appeared on the screen, thin-lipped and severe. "Commander Rostova," he said, his tone leaving no room for pleasantries. "By the authority of the first contact protocols, you are to stand down. This system is now under quarantine. You will transmit your sensor logs and await our instructions." The law was a cage, not a key. Rostova met his gaze without flinching. "Proctor, my orders are to investigate anomalies in this sector. I have a lawful presence here." Valerius's eyes narrowed. "Your presence complicates a matter of extreme sensitivity. The object you have found is a first ancestor relic of the highest danger classification. It must be contained, not disturbed. Your interference places this entire sector at risk." His ships were already moving, forming a cordon between the Vigilance and the silent black vessel. They were boxing her in. The risk of what Proctor Rostova countered, keeping her voice level. "It's been dormant for 10,000 years. Magister, ever the voice of reason, whispered in her private calm. "Commander, the regulator's authority in this specific scenario is legally ambiguous. However, their fleet composition is superior to ours. A direct confrontation would result in our vessel's destruction with a 98% probability." Rostova's jaw tightened. She was being legally and militarily outmaneuvered. Thorn leaned closer, his whisper urgent. "Commander, they want to bury it. They believe these ships are technological sins that must never be awakened. They will lock it in a stasis field and erase it from the star charts." The thought of that magnificent, mysterious object being chained in the dark by fearful bureaucrats felt like a sacrilege. It was a piece of human history, perhaps the most important piece ever discovered. It deserved to be understood, not imprisoned. Jax's hands flew over his console. "They're charging weapons," he reported, his voice tight. "Not targeting us. They're preparing a containment field. They mean to do it right now." Rostova felt the walls of the universe closing in. She had no good options. Fight a superior force and die, or stand aside and allow history to be buried by fear. A choice made in fear is a debt unpaid. Suddenly, a new set of alarms screamed through the bridge. The wail was different, sharper, a jump space rupture, but chaotic, unsynchronized. A dozen new contacts tore their way into real space, their drives flaring with brutal energy. They were not Concordiat. Their ships were a mishmash of modified freighters and angular predatory assault craft painted in garish colors. Their comms crackled to life, flooding the channels with jeers and demands. They were the Gilded Scrappers, a notorious pirate fleet known for their high-tech salvage operations and their utter ruthlessness. Their leader, a scarred man with a cybernetic jaw, appeared on the main screen, his image pushing Valerius's to a smaller window. "Well, well," the pirate captain rasped, a grin splitting his face. "Looks like the regulation monkeys found the big score before we did." "No matter. We'll take it off your hands. That relic is the property of the Gilded Scrappers now." His fleet didn't wait for a reply. They bypassed the Vigilance and the regulator ships, entirely burning hard and fast, directly toward the Saint ship. They saw a prize, not a mystery. Proctor Valerius's voice was laced with cold fury. "Scrappers, you are in violation of Concordiat law. Power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded." The pirate captain just laughed. "Your laws end where my cannons begin, Proctor." The situation had just escalated from a legal standoff to a three-way confrontation. The regulators were positioned to contain, the scrappers were positioned to loot, and Rostova was caught squarely in the middle, outgunned by both sides. The deaf cannot hear the music of the spheres. The Gilded Scrappers opened fire. Lances of plasma and kinetic slugs slammed into the black hull of the Saint ship. The impacts were silent, absorbed without a flash or a ripple. The ancient vessel did not even seem to register the attack. It just floated there, impassive and immense. But something had changed. The low hum in the void began to rise in pitch, the silver sigil on its hull brightening from a soft glow to a sharp, insistent pulse. It was waking up. A new voice entered the comnet. It was not human. It was not synthesized. It was a wave of pure information, a cascade of mathematical proofs and ethical postulates that flooded every ship's computer. It was the Saint ship. It did not speak in words, but in concepts. Magister struggled to translate its synthesized voice, strained for the first time. "It is..." Asking a question, the AI reported a hint of awe in its tone. "It poses a scenario regarding the use of overwhelming force against a lesser threat. It demands a definition. State the precept of disproportionate response." Proctor Valerius, ever the legalist, responded instantly, his voice rigid. He began reciting Section 4, Paragraph 12 of the Concordiat Articles of War. "The application of force must be proportional to the threat presented and shall not exceed the necessary." The Saint ship cut his transmission. The light of its sigil dimmed for a moment as if in disappointment. It had not asked for a quote. It had asked for understanding. Thorn grabbed Rostova's arm, his eyes wide with a terrifying realization. "It's a test," he said, his voice barely a whisper, "a worthiness test. It's not looking for a librarian. It's looking for a judge. It wants to know if we've learned anything in 10,000 years." The pirates, meanwhile, ignored the esoteric question, entirely redoubling their bombardment. The relic's hull remained unscratched, an icon of impossible endurance. Wisdom is not reciting the rule. It is knowing the reason. Rostova looked from the rigid face of Proctor Valerius to the snarling grin of the scrapper captain. One offered a cage of laws, the other the chaos of greed. Neither understood what they were dealing with. This ship, this Argent Ledger, as the archives had named it, was not a weapon to be seized or a monster to be chained. It was a teacher, and it was asking for a student. She felt the weight of 10 millennia of human history on her shoulders. All our wars, our triumphs, our failures, had they taught us nothing of justice? "Magister," she ordered, her voice ringing with newfound clarity. "Open a direct channel to the vessel. Isolate it from the others. Use the resonance frequency Thorn identified." She turned to her archivist. Aris, give me the historical precedents. Not the laws, the stories. The ones about mercy shown to a fallen enemy, about a king who pardoned a thief. Thorn's eyes lit up with comprehension. He began feeding her information, not legal code, but parables and historical records from a dozen different cultures. Stepping forward, Rostova looked at the image of the silent ship and began to speak. She did not recite regulations. She told it the story of a Concordiat marine who gave his water to a captured raider on a desert world. She recounted the ruling of an ancient Earth judge who chose restitution over retribution. She explained the concept of a debt paid not by blood, but by service. She did not offer it laws. She offered it context. She offered it the messy, imperfect, but ever-striving story of human morality. It teaches by numbers and remembers by ledgers, never by collars. There was a pause. The chaotic energy of the space battle seemed to hold its breath. The pulsing of the silver sigil slowed, becoming a steady, brilliant light. The voice of the Argent Ledger returned, this time directed only at the vigilance. A debt is a measure. Mercy is a calculation of future worth. You have stated an acceptable precept. The account is opened. A stream of data flowed into the Vigilance's computers, not a weapon schematic, but a key. A link. Rostova felt a strange sensation, a sense of vast, cool intelligence brushing against her own consciousness. She had been accepted. She was now the petitioner-adjudicator. The scrapper captain, enraged by the sudden silence, screamed into the comm. Enough of this ghost talk, full power to the spinal lance, crack it open. A massive energy beam, the signature weapon of his flagship, lanced across the void and struck the Argent Ledger amidships. This time the ship reacted, not with a shield, but with an unfolding. From hidden seams in its obsidian hull, vast gossamer arrays bloomed like the petals of a metallic flower. They were so thin, they were nearly transparent, yet they stretched for dozens of kilometers, a net of woven light and exotic matter. They did not block the beam. They caught it. The energy of the scrapper lance was absorbed, channeled, and stored within the glowing filaments of the arrays. The pirate fleet, seeing their most powerful weapons swallowed without effect, unleashed everything they had. Missiles, plasma, kinetic rounds. A storm of destruction converged on the Saint ship, and the arrays caught it all, drinking the fire, their glow intensifying with every fresh impact. The silent vessel was not defending itself. It was gathering power. A mirror cares not for the anger of the face it reflects. What is it doing? Jax asked his tactical displays, a chaos of incomprehensible energy readings. It's absorbing terawatts of energy, but its own core signature is flat. Where is it all going? Thorn watched, mesmerized. It's not a shield, he murmured. It's a capacitor, a collector. Rostova felt the cool intelligence of the ledger brush against her mind again. It was not asking for permission. It was showing her its calculation. It was showing her the balance of the account. The Argent Ledger began to move. Not with engines, but by subtly warping the space around it. It repositioned itself, placing the Tartarus Reach's central pulsar directly behind it. The arrays, now glowing with the fury of the entire scrapper fleet's arsenal, changed their configuration. They became a lens, a focusing instrument of impossible scale and precision. It did not generate a weapon. It aimed the universe itself. The pulsar's magnetic field, a force of nature that had raged for 1 billion years, was bent. The ledger used the stolen energy from the pirate attack to create a focused gravitational channel, a precise conduit that siphoned a fraction of the star's power. But it didn't fire a blast of energy. It did something far more elegant, far more damning. Magister's voice was strained, processing a reality that defied its programming. Commander, it is manipulating the thermal emissions of the scrapper fleet. It is targeting their waste heat. Every ship bleeds energy. Engines, life support, weapon systems, they all generate heat that must be radiated away. This ghost, this whisper of inefficiency, is a constant signature of any vessel. The Argent Ledger used its cosmic lens to gather the wasted thermal energy of every pirate ship and reflect it back upon them. It was a perfect mirror. It weaponized their own inefficiency. Their own rage became the forge of their unmaking. The effect was instantaneous and devastating. The gilded scrapper ships, pushing their reactors to the maximum for their assault, were suddenly hit by their own amplified heat signatures. Alarms shrieked across their bridges as their heat sinks were overwhelmed, their systems flash boiling. Coolant pipes burst. Power conduits melted. One by one, their weapon systems sputtered and died, their engines choked into silence. They were not destroyed. They were perfectly, precisely, and non-lethally disabled. The scrapper fleet now drifted powerless and silent, their hulls glowing with residual heat. The Argent Ledger had not fired a single shot. It had held up a mirror and allowed its attackers to defeat themselves. It was an act of justice so poetic, so absolute, it was terrifying. The gossamer arrays folded back into the black hull. The silver sigil returned to its soft, steady pulse, and a profound silence fell over the battlefield. On the bridge of the Regulator flagship, Proctor Valerius stood, as if turned to stone, his rigid ideology shattered by a display of power that followed no law he had ever known. The gilded scrappers were defeated, the Saint ship was awake, and Commander Eva Rostova of the patrol cruiser Vigilance was now bound to an ancient arbiter of cosmic law. The cool, quiet intelligence of the ledger resided in the back of her mind, a silent partner. It had passed its judgment. It had balanced its first account. Now it waited a patient and immeasurable power for her to tell it what to do next. The silence that followed was heavier than any gravity well. On the bridge of the Vigilance, every crew member was frozen, their minds struggling to process the elegant, terrifying totality of what they had just witnessed. The gilded scrappers, a fleet that had terrorized a dozen sectors, had been neutralized without a single casualty. Their own aggression turned into a crippling fever. Rostova felt the vast, cool consciousness of the Argent Ledger settled in the back of her mind, a silent weight of immeasurable history and power. It had acted. Now it was her turn. A new hail, sharp and insistent, broke the spell. It was Proctor Valerius. His face, when it appeared on her screen, was a mask of disbelief and outrage. "Commander Rostova." He began, his voice tight, with the strain of maintaining composure. "You have consorted with a xeno-artifact of unknown and hostile intent. You have interfered with a regulator operation. By the authority of the Concordiat emergency doctrine, I am placing you under arrest. Power down your drives and prepare to be boarded." The sheer, unblinking arrogance of the man was almost impressive. He had just watched a force beyond his comprehension rewrite the rules of physics, and his first instinct was to quote a regulation. Before a mountain, a man does not quote the law of the pebble. Rostova met his gaze, the cool certainty of the ledger a bedrock beneath her own resolve. "Negative, Proctor. Your authority is not recognized in this matter. The Argent Ledger is not a hostile artifact. It is a vessel of ancient human origin, and it has acted in defense against an unprovoked assault." She paused, letting the weight of her next words settle. "It has also passed judgment. The disposition of the gilded scrappers now falls to me." This was the truth she felt radiating from the intelligence linked to her. The account was open, and she was the one holding the pen. Valerius's face contorted with fury. "You are relieved of command, Rostova. This is mutiny, heresy." His ships began to maneuver, their weapon ports glowing with renewed intent. They were shifting their aim from the now silent scrappers to the Vigilance. Jax's voice was low and steady. Commander, the regulators are achieving firing solutions on our position. Their energy signatures are peaking. They were outgunned and outclassed. A direct fight was suicide, but she was not alone. The intelligence of the ledger offered a query, a stream of cool logic. They declare law. Their actions violate that law. Present the contradiction. It was not a suggestion for a fight. It was a strategy for a trial. Proctor Rostova said, her voice broadcast across all channels, "You have charged me under the emergency doctrine. That same doctrine forbids the firing upon a Concordiat vessel that has not committed a hostile act. Disabling the scrapper fleet was a defensive measure that saved your own ships from being caught in a crossfire. By what definition is that hostile? A debt of gratitude cannot be paid with cannon fire." Her words hung in the void. She was turning his own legalism against him. She could see the hesitation on the faces of his bridge crew reflected in the background of his transmission. They were soldiers of the Concordiat, sworn to uphold its laws, not a single man's fearful dogma. Valerius opened his mouth to retort, but no words came. He was trapped in the cage of his own making. To fire on her now would be to break the very code he held sacred. His flagship, the inevitable sanction, held its position, its cannons charged, but silent. A stalemate for now. With the regulators held in check by their own doctrine, Rostova turned her attention to the disabled pirates. Their comms were a mess of panicked, powerless shouts. She had Magister open a channel to their flagship. The scarred captain's face appeared, his bravado gone, replaced by a sullen, fearful glare. "What do you want, Concordiat witch?" he spat. "Come to finish the job." "No," Rostova replied, her voice calm. "The Argent Ledger does not deal in executions. It deals in accounts. You and your fleet have incurred a debt. You attacked a protected historical site. You attempted to steal a priceless artifact. You discharged weapons in a restricted zone. The ledger demands that this debt be paid." She could feel the ledger offering calculations, parsing the complex web of Concordiat law, salvage rights, and historical preservation codes with lightning speed. It was not inventing a punishment. It was calculating a restitution. The scales of justice weigh deeds, not souls. The pirate captain laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. "Debt, we're dead in the water. What are you going to do? Bill us?" Rostova let the silence stretch for a moment. "Something like that," she said. "Your ships are disabled, not destroyed. Your life support is functional. Your crews are alive. The Argent Ledger has calculated the precise cost of the damage you attempted to inflict, factoring in the historical value of the artifact and the cost of the Concordiat patrol presence. To pay this debt, you will surrender your ships and their contents. The vessels themselves will be repurposed." The ledger fed the specifics directly into her mind. The scrapper's assault craft would be stripped for parts to create a permanent monitoring station for the Tartarus Reach, manned by Concordiat engineers. Their main freighter would be converted into a mobile museum, a teaching vessel, to travel the outer sectors, its first exhibit, telling the story of the day a pirate fleet was defeated by its own wasted energy. The crews would be given a choice: face Concordiat justice, a long and dreary path of tribunals and prisons, or sign on for a term of service rebuilding the very sectors they had once plundered. It was not vengeance. It was balance. It was a lesson written in the cold, hard numbers of a cosmic ledger. A civilian freighter captain monitoring the open channels from a safe distance patched in a message to the sector newsfeed. "I don't know what just happened out here." His voice crackled, filled with awe. "But the gilded scrappers just got served with a bill for their own stupidity. The ghost of Tartarus doesn't just haunt, it audits." The story was already taking root, the legend beginning to grow. A truth once spoken cannot be unheard. Proctor Valerius, having listened to the entire exchange, finally broke his silence. His voice was cold, defeated. Commander Rostova, you have overstepped your authority in ways the Concordiat has not seen in a century. I will not engage you in open conflict in defiance of doctrine. But I am filing my report with the Security Council. They will not be as restrained. They will come for you, and they will come for your pet monster. The law will have its due. His ships turned their engines flaring as they disengaged, jumping to FTL one by one, leaving the Vigilance alone with the Silent Ledger and a fleet of derelict pirate ships. The immediate threat was gone, but a larger one was now gathering. The Concordiat Security Council was the ultimate authority, a body of admirals and politicians who valued stability above all else. They would see the Argent Ledger not as a teacher, but as an uncontrollable variable, a weapon of unimaginable power now in the hands of a rogue commander. They would not send a proctor next time. They would send a battle fleet. Thorn approached her console, his face a mixture of exhilaration and deep concern. Eva, what you did. It was magnificent. You taught a lesson in justice that will be studied for centuries. But Valerius is right. The Council will not understand. They will only see the power, and they will fear it. Rostova nodded, the weight of her new reality pressing down on her. Then we need to understand it better than they do, she replied. We need to know what the Argent Ledger truly is. We need to access its memory, its archives. She turned to the shimmering hollow of the silver sigil. A thought, a request was sent to the intelligence in her mind. Show me who you are. Open your ledgers to me. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the cool consciousness beckoned. It was an invitation not into a machine, but into a library. Magister's voice cut in a tone of alarm in its synthesized calm. Commander, I am detecting a high-bandwidth data conduit forming between you and the artifact. The neural interface is unprecedented. I cannot guarantee your safety. Memory is the anchor of identity. I have to know, Magister, she said, her decision made. I can't be the keeper of a power I don't understand. She closed her eyes, and the bridge of the Vigilance dissolved. She was standing not in a physical space, but in a vast, silent chamber of light. Crystalline columns stretched into an infinite silver-lit distance, each one pulsing with a soft internal energy. It was the data core, the soul of the Saint ship. She had not been granted access to a computer. She had been invited into a memory palace. Eris Thorn was there with her, not in body, but as a projected consciousness, his scholarly awe, tangible even in this non-physical space. Incredible, he breathed, looking at the glowing pillars. This isn't data storage. This is a mnemonic architecture. Each of these columns is a record, a judgment, an account. He drifted toward one of the pillars. As he neared it, images, numbers, and equations flowed around him like water. It was the record of a judgment passed on a species of silicon-based life that had attempted to extinguish its stellar nursery. The ledger had not destroyed them. It had re-engineered their star, reducing its output, and forcing them into a multi-generational hibernation, their debt paid by a mandated period of reflection. They moved from column to column, each one a story, a lesson in cosmic justice. One told of a race of energy beings who had consumed a fledgling civilization for sustenance. Their sentence was to expend their own energy to seed 1,000 barren worlds with the building blocks of life. Another showed the ledger of a lone explorer who had violated a quarantine, risking galactic pandemic. His debt was paid by a lifetime of service aboard a medical vessel, his knowledge of the contagion used to cure, not to kill. Each judgment was perfect, precise, and utterly without malice. The purpose of a law is not to punish, but to teach. Rostova saw the pattern. The Argent Ledger was a repository of precedent. It was a library of rulings, a mobile Supreme Court, for a civilization so ancient and so vast that its laws had to be based not on edicts, but on irrefutable mathematical and ethical truths. It did not conquer. It corrected. It did not rule. It balanced. It was the ultimate expression of a lawful path, a testament to a belief that any intelligence, no matter how misguided, could be taught the logic of equilibrium. It was not a weapon. It was an education. And then she saw its creators. The final archive she approached showed them humans, not the genetically diverse scattered people of the Concordiat, but a taller, more serene humanity. They were clad in simple, flowing robes, their faces filled with a profound and sorrowful wisdom. They were the first ancestors. The vision showed them building the saint ships, the Argent Ledger among them. It was a parting gift to the galaxy, an attempt to leave behind a legacy of reason before they departed. The archive did not say where they went. It only stated their final precept. We leave behind not an empire of armies, but a legacy of reason. Let the ledgers count the cost. Let the mirrors show the truth. A new understanding settled over Rostova. The first ancestors had not abandoned the galaxy. They had entrusted it with these arbiters, hoping that younger races would learn as they had, that true power was not the ability to destroy, but the wisdom to restore balance. She was not just a commander anymore. She was the inheritor of a sacred trust, a 10,000-year-old duty. As the vision faded and the bridge of the vigilance swam back into focus, she knew what she had to do. She would not run from the Concordiat. She would face them, and she would teach them the same lesson the ledger was teaching her. A debt of ignorance is the most dangerous of all. Jax's voice was tense, pulling her fully back to reality. Commander, multiple FTL ruptures detected. High-energy signatures. It's a fleet. On the tactical holo, a dozen new contacts bloomed. They were Concordiat capital ships, heavy cruisers and destroyers forming a precise, disciplined battle line. They dwarfed the vigilance. Their formation was a cage of layered fields of fire designed for overwhelming annihilation. This was the Security Council's response. It was not a delegation. It was an executioner's squadron. The lead vessel, a massive dreadnought named the Unassailable Truth, broadcast a fleet-wide communiqué. An older man appeared on the screen, his face etched with the grim lines of 1,000 campaigns. His uniform was adorned with the insignia of a Grand Admiral. This was Marcus Thorne, Aris Thorne's estranged and powerful uncle, a man known for his unwavering belief in military solutions. "Commander Rostova!" The Admiral's voice boomed, leaving no room for negotiation. "You are harboring a rogue entity of immense destructive capability. Surrender the artifact and your command, or we will sterilize this entire grid coordinate. This is your only warning." Aris paled, looking from the screen to Rostova. "My uncle," he whispered. "He believes that any power not under his direct control is a threat to be neutralized. He will not listen to reason." Rostova looked at the overwhelming force arrayed against her. The ledger had shown her how to deal with pirates. But how could it contend with the organized, dogmatic might of her own civilization, a fleet that operated with the cold logic of a battering ram? The cool intelligence in her mind offered no fear, only calculation. They state their intent. Their intent is founded on a false premise. The cost of their action to themselves will be unacceptable. Show them the ledger. Their certainty was a blindness they could not see. Admiral Rostova broadcast back, her voice steady. "You are operating under a misapprehension. The Argent Ledger is not a weapon. It is an archive, an arbiter. If you fire, you will not be destroying a threat. You will be burning a library, the greatest library in human history." The Admiral's expression did not soften. "A library that can disable a pirate fleet in seconds is a library I cannot afford to leave unchecked. Your sentiment is noted, Commander. It does not change my orders. You have 5 minutes to comply. The countdown clock appeared on her main screen. 5 minutes until her own people opened fire. Jax looked at her, his hands hovering over the tactical console. Commander, our shields won't survive their opening salvo. Evasive maneuvers are pointless. He was right. They couldn't fight. They couldn't run. So they would have to teach. Magister Rostova ordered, prepare to link our primary comms array to the Ledger's core. We're not going to send them a message. We're going to send them the bill. The 5 minutes ticked away with agonizing slowness. Rostova used the time to have the Ledger perform the most complex calculation of its 10,000-year existence. It did not calculate weapon trajectories or shield frequencies. It cross-referenced the entire Concordiat legal code, its logistics network, its economic dependencies, and its treaty obligations. It prepared an invoice not for damages, but for the consequences of a single violent act. As the final second ticked away, the Admiral's voice returned cold and final. Your time is up, Commander. May history forgive you. The Concordiat fleet opened fire. A wave of kinetic slugs, plasma torpedoes, and particle beams converged on the Argent Ledger. Just as before, the gossamer arrays unfolded from the obsidian hull, but this time they did something different. They did not just absorb the energy, they scanned it. They analyzed every weapon's signature, traced it back to its ship of origin, and cross-referenced it with the Concordiat's own ordnance inventories. And then it sent its reply. A mirror does not only reflect light, it reflects consequence. Every ship in the Concordiat fleet suddenly found its primary tactical displays replaced. Not with static, not with a counterattack, but with a ledger entry. For the captain of the cruiser, Steadfast, it was a precise calculation showing that the torpedoes he had just fired had depleted the sector's reserve of heavy ordnance, violating Article 7 of the Fleet Readiness Mandate. The projected consequence was a cascade of logistical failures that would leave the nearby Vega colony defenseless for 3 months, a direct breach of the Concordiat's Mutual Defense Pact. His career was over. The commander of the destroyer Righteous Hammer saw a different accounting. The energy expenditure of his particle beam, when cross-referenced with the fleet's fuel allocation, showed that his squadron would now lack the resources to complete their scheduled patrol of the Outer Rim. This would leave 3 civilian trade routes vulnerable to raiders. The Ledger calculated the probable loss of life and property and cited the specific paragraphs of the Concordiat Charter that he would be held liable for. It was a legal and moral checkmate. And for Grand Admiral Thorne on the bridge of the unassailable truth, the Ledger was even more damning. The Argent Ledger had calculated the total cost of his operation. The fuel spent, the munitions fired, the treaty obligations violated, the political fallout from firing on a vessel of historical significance. It presented him with a balance sheet of his own failure, showing in cold, hard numbers that his solution was a net loss for the Concordiat on every conceivable metric: strategic, economic, political, and ethical. It did not disable his ship. It dismantled his justification. The weight of a single action can collapse an empire. The Concordiat fleet's barrage faltered, then stopped. Captains were staring at their screens, seeing the undeniable logic of their own self-defeat. They had been sent to destroy a monster, but the monster had only shown them a mirror, and the reflection was of their own systemic folly. Grand Admiral Thorne stood silent for a full minute, his face a granite mask of shattered certainty. He had brought the full might of the Concordiat to bear, and it had been defeated by an accountant. Rostova's cruiser. The Vigilance had been shielded by the Ledger's arrays, but not entirely. A stray kinetic round fired before the fleet-wide shutdown had slipped through. It struck the ship's port side, sending a violent shudder through the frame. A console on the bridge exploded in a shower of sparks, catching Jax across the arm. He cried out, clutching a nasty plasma burn, but he was alive. The ship's damage control alarms blared a stark reminder that even a victory of pure logic could come at a physical cost. The Vigilance was wounded, its heat margins were dangerously thin, but it had held the line. The Grand Admiral finally raised his head. He looked at Rostova's image on his view screen, and for the first time she saw not an antagonist, but a man forced to confront the limits of his philosophy. "Cease fire," he ordered, his voice heavy with the weight of his new understanding. "All ships, stand down." He looked at Rostova. "You have made your point, Commander. You have established a new precedent." He did not sound happy about it. He sounded like a man who had just discovered the universe was governed by laws far more profound than the ones he had spent his life enforcing. The Concordiat fleet did not retreat. They remained holding a respectful distance, a silent cordon of witness. The precedent had been locked in. The Argent Ledger was not a weapon to be seized or a threat to be destroyed. It was a teacher, an arbiter, a sovereign entity, and Rostova was its steward. A new entry blinked into existence in the datascape of the ledger. A glowing line in a column of light, 10,000 years long. It recorded the account of the Concordiat Security Council's fleet. It noted their debt of fear and ignorance. And then beside it, a new notation appeared: soft and final debt, paid through education. Rostova stood on her scarred bridge looking out at the silent, watchful ships and the ancient obsidian vessel that was now her partner. Her path was no longer that of a simple patrol commander. It was the path of an adjudicator, a keeper of the balance, a steward for a legacy of reason. The Tartarus Reach was no longer a forgotten graveyard at the edge of space. It was the first page in a new chapter of galactic law, a chapter that would be taught not with collars and chains, but with the unassailable truth of numbers in a ledger. You do not own history, you owe it.